The scuffed linoleum floors of Harper Industries groaned softly beneath Tom Wilson's cleaning cart. As he made his nightly rounds through the deserted executive wing, it was nearly midnight 11:47 p.m. to be exact, and the building should have been cloaked in silence, save for the low hum of distant machinery and the ghost of a corporate party long since over. But that night, the stillness was pierced by the sound of quiet sobbing, raw and aching, echoing from the far end of the hallway, behind a pane of frosted glass. Through the silhouette of etched black letters that spelled Elizabeth Harper, Tom saw her Harper Industries enigmatic CEO slumped over her imposing mahogany desk. Her sharp composure crumpled like discarded silk. Her face, streaked with mascara and sorrow, rose slowly when she sensed his presence. Their eyes met. Hers, red-rimmed and glassy, seemed to plead for something even she didn't understand. Tom, a janitor invisible by design, had seen the aftermath of many executive gatherings, but never had he witnessed someone so powerful look so utterly shattered. The following morning, she would offer him something that would turn his world on its head, a proposal that would blur the lines between rank and ruin, and reframe everything he believed about money, connection, and the true cost of loneliness. For 3 years, Tom had quietly mopped the marble and glass monument that was Harper Industries. At 45, he was a ghost in steel corridors polished to a shine, arriving only when the suits had retreated to their gated lives, and vanishing before they reappeared with fresh lattes and Bluetooth headsets. It was a rhythm that suited him: a decent wage, solitude, and most importantly, the freedom to be home when 12-year-old Emma walked through the door after school. She was his anchor, the reason he hadn't drowned in grief after his wife passed, the reason he got out of bed at all. The night of the company's Christmas gala had left behind its usual remnants of opulence: half-filled champagne flutes, lipstick smudged, napkins, and the scent of expensive perfume layered over wine. As Tom worked his way through each floor with practiced precision, he noticed the odd glow of lights still burning on the 15th executive floor. Elizabeth Harper's office was illuminated, her name etched coldly in the glass, now pulsing softly with warmth. He'd seen her only 3 times in 3 years, always from a respectful distance. She carried herself like a woman carved from ambition-tailored suits, measured words, and a still composure that didn't just suggest power, but commanded it. She'd built this empire brick by digital brick, but tonight, the woman inside that office wasn't the titan of industry. She looked small, folded into herself, drowning in something far heavier than whiskey. Tom hesitated. His hand, rough from years of scrubbing forgotten floors, tightened around the mop handle. He knew the role's janitors didn't speak to executives, especially not Harper, but the sound of her sobs, gut-wrenching, desperate, cut through the barriers of hierarchy. He recognized it. That kind of grief wasn't unfamiliar. He'd heard it behind Emma's bedroom door too many nights to count. It was the sound of carrying too much, alone. He knocked gently. "Mrs. Harper, everything okay in there?" The sobs stopped like a curtain had fallen. Silence. Then a rustle of papers, a shift in leather. "Just leave me alone," came her voice, thick with drink and something far older despair. Tom should have walked away, should have obeyed the unspoken rule of invisibility. Instead, he nudged the door open, just a sliver. She was slouched behind her desk, the throne of a queen, in exile. Her golden hair was undone, falling limply over a stained blouse, and her blazer-tailored and proud look crumpled and defeated. Empty whiskey bottles stood like silent sentinels beside her laptop. "I said leave me alone," she repeated, softer this time. The fight in her voice had dimmed. "I can't do that, ma'am," Tom replied, stepping in. "My forgotten. Not when someone's hurting like this." She gave a brittle laugh, sharp as glass. "You don't know anything about hurt, Mr. Wilson." She read from his name tag, squinting. "You have no idea what it's like to have everything and still feel completely hollow." Tom said nothing, but her words struck something inside him. He thought of Emma's medical bills, still unpaid, of Sarah, his wife, and how her hand had felt in his the night she slipped away in a hospital soaked in disinfectant. And grief. He thought of the fear in Emma's eyes, fear that he might disappear, too. But he didn't share any of that. Instead, he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Watching with a wary stare. Calling you a cab," he said. Simply, "You can't drive like this. I don't think you want the headlines reading. Harper Industries CEO gets DUI on Christmas." She blinked, and then, to his surprise, she laughed. Really laughed, half sob, half hysteria. "You know what's ridiculous?" she whispered. "I've got 12 vice presidents, a board full of Ivy Leaguers, and an assistant who makes more than a surgeon. But the only person who gives a damn about getting me home safe is the janitor." 20 minutes later, he was helping her into the elevator, gathering her things like delicate porcelain. She leaned against the mirrored wall, her voice low and distant. "I built this place from scratch. 15 years, 18-hour days. I gave up friends, love, life. And do you know what I got this Christmas?" She snorted. "A fruit basket from my accountant, and a thank you card for record-breaking profits." Tom didn't speak. Sometimes silence was the most generous gift. Outside, the Chicago wind knifed through his thin jacket as he opened the cab door. For her, she murmured an address in Lincoln Park, one of those places where even the streetlights looked expensive. As the cab pulled away, she rolled down the window and called out, voice nearly lost in the cold. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Tom tucked his hands into his pockets. "Because everyone deserves to get home safe." The next morning came too fast. Tom had barely dozed 3 hours before Emma's alarm clock jolted their small apartment into motion. She flitted around in her school uniform, full of life and stories about her science fair. Tom, exhausted, moved in slow motion as he packed her lunch and tried to keep the ache in his bones hidden. "You look tired, Dad," Emma observed, her big eyes so much like her mother's watching him closely. "Did you work late again? Just some extra cleaning?" he said, brushing a kiss into her hair. "Nothing to worry about." At the door, she paused. "Dad, are you happy?" The question hit like a freight train. "What makes you ask?" Dad, she shrugged. "To mature for 12. Sometimes you look like you're somewhere else. Like you're thinking about Mom." His throat tightened. She rarely spoke of Sarah. Her grief had gone underground, into silence and shadows. He knelt to her level, brushing a straight curl from her forehead. "I'm happy," he said, meaning it as best he could. "As long as I've got you, I'm exactly where I need to be." After she left, Tom tried to catch up on sleep before his community center shift. He coached basketball for kids whose parents couldn't afford after-school care, but his mind wouldn't let him rest. Elizabeth Harper's tear-stained face haunted him, the weight of power, the isolation of being seen only as a title. At 10:30 a.m., his phone rang. A known number. "Mr. Wilson," came the familiar voice, this time clear and sober. "This is Elizabeth Harper. I was wondering if you'd be willing to meet me for coffee this morning." Tom sat up, blinking. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Harper? Something wrong at the office? Please call me Elizabeth," she said gently. "And no, nothing's wrong. I want to thank you properly for last night. And I have something I'd like to discuss with you." They met at a small diner near Tom's apartment, the kind of place with chipped mugs and waitresses who called everyone honey. Elizabeth looked nothing like the broken woman he'd seen slumped over whiskey and regret, but behind her composed smile and crisp coat, he could still see the same fragility, only now held together with trembling threads of hope. And thus began a conversation between a man who had nothing and gave everything, and a woman who had everything but felt nothing. A conversation that would bloom into something neither of them expected: redemption, connection, and a second chance at being seen. Her hair was sculpted into a flawless chignon, her makeup impeccable, her navy suit tailored to perfection, the image of power, precision, and control. Yet beneath that polished exterior, Tom Wilson could see the cracks in her armor. Her hands trembled ever so slightly around the rim of her coffee cup. betraying the effort it took to maintain the illusion. I don't remember everything from last night, Elizabeth Harper murmured once they'd ordered, her voice hushed but steady. But I remember you being kind, when you didn't have to be. Then she tilted her head, studying him. When was the last time someone was genuinely kind to you, Mr. Wilson? The question landed softly, yet with startling weight. Every day, Tom replied simply, a small smile warming his weathered face. My daughter's the kindest person I know. Elizabeth's gaze softened, her corporate persona dimming like a theater light after the curtain falls. Tell me about her. So Tom did. He spoke of Emma's sharp wit and boundless heart, how she'd started a recycling program at school, how she volunteered to tutor younger students, how she dreamt of saving the oceans as a marine biologist. He painted his daughter in stories like brushstrokes on a canvas, each one vibrant, alive, full of love. And as he spoke, something inside Elizabeth shifted. Her rigid posture eased, her expression thawed, and for the first time, the CEO mask truly slipped. What emerged beneath was not Harper Industries' powerhouse, but a woman, raw and real. She sounds extraordinary, Elizabeth whispered. You must be very proud, every single day, Tom said, meeting her eyes. Then, after a long pause, he added, Can I ask you something? She nodded, cautious. Last night, you seemed, he hesitated, not pathetic, lonely. Elizabeth let out a breath that carried both relief and regret. Her laugh was dry, self-aware. Yeah, that was a new low, even for me. Tom didn't laugh. I was going to say, human, he said gently. She looked down at her coffee, fingers tracing the rim as though grounding herself. When I was building this company, she said quietly, I told myself that success would fill the empty spaces, that achievement would quiet the ache. Her voice faltered. But you know what I realized last night? I've built walls so high to protect everything that I've imprisoned myself inside them. Tom waited. Her silence wasn't empty, it was gathering. I watch you sometimes, Elizabeth admitted, cheeks tinged with color. From my office window, I see you leaving work. You always look like you're heading somewhere that matters, like someone's waiting for you. I realized I've never known what that feels like. The confession cracked something open between them. This wasn't Harper the executive. This was just Elizabeth, a woman with everything, and yet starved of the one thing that mattered. Elizabeth, Tom said softly, what exactly are you asking me? She straightened, the remnants of her corporate self snapping back like muscle memory. But her voice trembled with something deeper than nerves. I want to hire you, she said. I already work for your company. No, not as a janitor. She looked at him, hope and desperation in her eyes. As a friend. Tom blinked. I'm sorry. What? I know how it sounds. She rushed. But please, hear me out. I'll pay you $5,000 a month to be my friend, to help me understand what it's like to have someone who actually cares. If I make it home, to teach me how to be the kind of person who deserves kindness. The hum of the cafe fell away, and all Tom could hear was the wild drum of his own heart. $5,000 a month was more than he made in an entire quarter. It was Emma's college fund, her medical coverage, stability, and yet something about the offer made his stomach knot. You can't buy friendship, he said carefully. I know that, Elizabeth whispered, her voice cracking, but I don't know how else to learn it. I've forgotten how to be real. Tom, I've been a CEO for so long. I don't know how to be human anymore. She leaned forward, eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. Last night, you didn't help me because of who I am on paper. You did it because it was right. Do you know how long it's been since someone did something for me just because it was right? Tom thought of Emma, of the unpaid bills on the counter, of the late nights, the lost dreams, and the kind of father he was trying to be. Then he looked at the woman sitting across from him, wildly successful, impossibly lonely, and so desperate for connection that she was willing to purchase a facsimile of it. And what would this friendship involve? He asked. Elizabeth's relief was visible. Her shoulders sagged, like a heavy weight had slipped slightly from her back. I don't know. She admitted honestly. Maybe start with showing me what your weekends look like. What it's like to have dinner with someone who doesn't want something from me. Help me see what I've missed. She reached into her purse and pulled out a pre-written check for $5. Zero. This is just for the first month. No strings attached. If this feels too weird or if I'm too far gone to help, you can keep the money and walk away. Tom stared at the check. It was more money than he'd ever held in his life. But looking at Elizabeth's trembling hands and her glassy, pleading eyes, he felt like he was teetering on the edge of something far more profound than a financial decision. Elizabeth, he said quietly, what aren't you telling me? She exhaled sharply and the truth poured out in a whisper. I'm dying, Tom, she said, eyes flooding, not physically, but inside. I wake up in a penthouse. That feels like a tomb. And I go to bed every night wondering if anyone would notice if I never woke up. A tear rolled down her cheek. I built a life filled with everything, and it feels like nothing. You have something I've never had, someone who loves you just because. I want to know what that feels like even if I have to pay someone to teach me. Tom's chest ached at the sight of her, the woman who had it all, now crumbling from within, begging not for charity, but for meaning. He looked at the check again, then back at her. Keep your money, he said gently. Her face fell. I understand. It was a crazy idea. I didn't say no. Tom interrupted. I said keep your money. If we're going to be friends, real friends, it can't start with a transaction. Hope flickered like dawn in her eyes. You mean it? She asked. I mean it. But I've got conditions. Anything. First, this has to be real. No pretending. If you're having a bad day, say it. If I think you're being ridiculous, I'll tell you. She nodded quickly. Second, Emma comes first. Always. My time with her isn't negotiable. Of course. And third, he paused, voice firmer now. You have to do the work. Friendship isn't clean. It's messy, awkward. Sometimes it hurts. You ready for that? I've been ready my whole life, Elizabeth said softly. I just didn't know it. As they shook hands across the cafe table, something unspoken passed between them, an uncharted promise. Tom knew he was stepping into unfamiliar terrain, and yet, looking into Elizabeth's grateful, vulnerable smile, he thought maybe, just maybe, this was where healing began. So, Elizabeth said with a shy smile, slipping the untouched check back into her purse, what do friends do on Saturday afternoons? Tom chuckled. Well, Emma's got a basketball game at 2. After that, we usually hit the ice cream shop on Maple Street. Think a CEO can survive gym bleachers? I've survived shareholder meetings, she said with a grin. How hard can it be? As they walked out of the cafe together, the wind crisp and hopeful, Tom couldn't help but wonder what he'd just agreed to. He'd find out 5 months later in the most unexpected way possible. That Saturday, Elizabeth Harper sat stiffly on the cold metal bleachers of Lincoln Elementary School's gymnasium. The air reeked of floor wax and teenage sweat. Around her, parents chatted about carpools and parent-teacher meetings. She wore jeans and a sweater, the most casual outfit she'd donned in public in over a decade, and still felt like she was wearing a disguise. Beside her, Tom whooped as Emma raced down the court, her ponytail a streak of motion, her eyes locked on the basket. Elizabeth watched in awe as father and daughter connected with every glance, every cheer, every shared moment. Tom's entire face lit up with each point Emma scored, and Emma, after every shot, searched the crowd for her father's approval, her eyes gleaming. She's incredible, Elizabeth whispered as Emma sank a perfect three-pointer. Gets that from her mother, Tom replied, a note of both pride and ache in his voice. It was the first time he'd spoken Sarah's name and to Elizabeth. It felt like an honor. A tiny door opened, a truth shared dot, and for the first time in her adult life, Elizabeth Harper felt the faint, fragile flicker of something real, belonging. Over the past 3 weeks, something tender had begun to bloom between Tom and Elizabeth, something neither of them had expected nor dared to name. It unfolded not with fanfare, but in the quiet cadence of routine and the warmth of shared spaces. Slowly, gently, Their fragile bond deepened, built not on grand gestures, but on the soft, sacred rituals of everyday life. Tom, ever grounded and open-hearted, had ushered Elizabeth into his humble world with the kind of patience that can only come from someone who has known pain and survived it. He introduced her to the unhurried charm of Saturday morning pancakes at Joe's Diner, the kind where the syrup sticks to your fingers and the waitstaff knows your name. On Sundays, they wandered through Lincoln Park, leaves crunching underfoot, talking about everything and nothing. Elizabeth marveled at the novelty of grocery shopping without an assistant, of choosing her own apples and pushing the cart like she belonged in a world that wasn't curated for her. In return, Elizabeth began to share slivers of her life, the story of how she built Harper Industries brick by brick in the unforgiving shadows of a male-dominated empire. She spoke, for the first time in years, about the hollow victories, the lonely boardrooms, the glass ceiling she shattered only to find more silence at the top. Her voice carried both pride and sorrow, the echo of sacrifices she once believed were noble, only now realizing what they had truly cost her. After Emma's basketball game victory sealed by 12 triumphant points, they celebrated the way they always did, ice cream and scoops. The small shop had become a kind of sacred place for them, a sanctuary of sticky fingers and wide grins. Emma, still flushed with excitement, demolished a double scoop of chocolate chip as she animatedly recounted every play. Elizabeth, who once found such scenes foreign, laughed freely, fully, the sound almost startling in its purity. Then Emma, in that way only children can, pierced the fragile veil of unspoken truths. "Dad, Elizabeth should come to career day," she blurted, eyes sparkling. "Mrs. Patterson says we need more female entrepreneurs." Tom and Elizabeth exchanged a loaded glance of spoken agreements hanging in the air. They had been cautious, wary of complicating the story Emma knew about her father's job, his world, his quiet sacrifices. "I don't know, sweetheart." Tom hedged gently. "Elizabeth's probably too busy." But before he could finish, Elizabeth's voice sure and soft-cutting. "I'd love to," she said. The words surprised her as much as they did Tom. "If your dad's okay with it." Of course. Emma lit up like a tree on Christmas morning. "Really? That's so cool. None of the other kids have a friend who's a real CEO." Later that night, after Emma had been tucked in and the apartment had gone still, Elizabeth and Tom sat on the balcony of his modest apartment, sipping wine beneath a soft blanket of stars. The contrast between her penthouse and his tiny living space was jarring, yet she felt more at home here, surrounded by laundry lines and city noise, than she had in any room of glass and marble. "You don't have to do the career day thing," Tom said gently as he poured more wine into her glass. "Emma gets excited. She sometimes asks for too much." "I want to do it," Elizabeth said, her voice steady and raw. "When was the last time someone was excited to spend time with me just because they thought I was interesting, not because I could give them something?" Tom turned to look at her, truly look at her in the dim light. "Is that really how you see yourself?" he asked quietly. "As someone people only tolerate because they want something?" Elizabeth stared out into the night, the city glittering beneath them, like a promise just out of reach. "You know, what's funny?" she whispered. "I spent years building walls telling myself it was to protect what I'd earned. But somewhere along the way, I forgot there might be people worth letting in." She turned to him then, her face bare and open. "Now I'm terrified that if you really saw me who I really am, you'd decide I wasn't worth the effort." Tom's voice was low but resolute. "Elizabeth, the real you is the woman who sat in a gym and cheered for a little girl she barely knew. The real you is the person who spent an hour helping Emma with her science project even though you had 3 board meetings waiting. That person is absolutely worth the effort." Tears glimmered in Elizabeth's eyes, but for the first time, they weren't born from despair. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make me feel like I'm enough, just as I am." The question hung between them like a fragile bridge, and something deep in Tom shifted, a warmth unfurling, one he hadn't allowed himself to feel since Sarah. It was terrifying and thrilling. Over the next few weeks, their lives grew tangled in the best possible way. Elizabeth, once so meticulously composed, found herself belly laughing at Sunday cartoons, burning grilled cheese in Tom's cramped kitchen, and accidentally dumping flour on her head while trying to make pancakes. She cursed with surprising enthusiasm when things went wrong, and Emma thought it was hilarious. But it was the quiet moments that truly mattered. The night Elizabeth held Emma close while the girls sobbed about missing her mother. The evening Tom talked her down from a panic attack, her hands trembling over the weight of a looming merger. Or the Saturday when they all sat in silence, each with a different book, the hush of domestic peace settling over them like a blessing. Elizabeth began leaving spare clothes at the apartment. Without thinking, Emma started asking if Elizabeth would be joining them for things, casually, as though it was already assumed. They had become unspokenly, uncertainly something that looked like family, until it all shattered. It was a gray Thursday in March, rain slapping against the windows like accusations. Tom was at Elizabeth's stove, teaching her how to make his grandmother's meatloaf when the front door burst open. Emma stood soaked and shaking in the entryway, tears carving lines down her cheeks. "Dad," she gasped, running into his arms. "Mrs. Henderson, she called me into her office, and she had these papers." Tom felt his stomach lurch. "What papers, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She said someone's been paying my school fees for 3 years. She showed me." "Dad," her voice broke. It was Elizabeth. Her name's on all of them. Silence swept through the room, a silence so thick it nearly suffocated them. Elizabeth went pale, her arms instinctively crossing over her chest as if trying to hold herself together. "Emma," she began, her voice shaking, "I can explain. You've been paying for my school." Emma whispered, betrayal etched across her young face. This whole time, Tom set Emma aside, his expression a mask of careful control. "Elizabeth," he said evenly. "How long?" "Tom, please," she begged. "How long?" he repeated, this time with more ice than he'd thought. Her voice was barely a whisper. 3 years, since you started at Harper." Tom closed his eyes. "You've been paying for Emma's tuition behind my back for 3 years, and you never once thought—" "I deserve to know." "I couldn't," she choked out. "You would have said no, and she needed it. That wasn't your decision to make," Tom said, his voice rising. "Rah, she's my daughter. That decision was mine." Emma looked between them, pain etched across her features. "So this wasn't real. You just felt sorry for us?" "No." Elizabeth dropped to her knees. "Emma, sweetheart, please don't call me that," Emma shouted, backing away. "You lied. You both lied to me." She fled to her room, the door slamming like a gavel on a sentence none of them had wanted to hear. Tom turned slowly to Elizabeth. "Explain," he said bitterly. "Explain how you turned our lives into some charity project to make yourself feel better." "That's not what this is, isn't it?" Tom snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you bought yourself a family so you wouldn't feel so damn alone." The words struck Elizabeth like blows. She staggered under their weight. "You know that's not true," she whispered. "Do I?" Tom's voice cracked. "How do I know anything you've said, anything you've done is real?" Then, softly, brokenly, Elizabeth said, "Because I love you." The room went still. "I love you and Emma more than I've ever loved anything in my life," she continued, tears falling freely. "And yes, I paid for her school because I couldn't bear to watch her miss out. But that was before I knew you, before I understood what I was taking away from you. I was trying to help. I just didn't know how to tell you." Tom stared at her, chest rising and falling with the force of too many emotions. "You love us?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Elizabeth said. "I know I have no right to. I know I've broken something beautiful. But you and Emma, you're the first real family I've ever had. And I destroyed it because I was too afraid to tell the truth." In the silence that followed, the only sound was Emma crying behind her closed door, and Tom, heart aching and world spinning, looked at Elizabeth, not the CEO, not the benefactor, but the woman who had made a mistake out of love. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why didn't you just tell me?" She looked at him then, not with power or pride, but with the desperate honesty of someone who had never truly known how to be loved and now, too late, realized she had been. Elizabeth sank into the worn kitchen chair like the weight of her secrets had finally become too much to bear. At just 38, she looked old or fragile, like life had weathered her from the inside out. Her voice cracked, low and thick with emotion. "Because I was terrified you'd leave," she whispered. "At first, paying for Emma's school felt like a way to soothe my guilt. I saw you, the single father, giving everything you had, and then some, and I had more money than I'd ever need. Helping felt right. But then I got to know you both, and I realized I wasn't just helping. I was taking something from you, your pride, your role, and by the time I understood that, I was already too far in. I didn't know how to undo the damage." Tom sat across from her, his jaw tight, his emotions a swirling storm. Rage tugged at his pride, but understanding softened its grip. "Elizabeth," he began, carefully, "that money, without it, Emma doesn't go to college. Tell me, how am I supposed to repay you? You don't." Her voice was firmer now, but her eyes shimmered with vulnerability. "That was never a loan. It was a gift. Emma deserves every door open to her, and if I could be the one to unlock them, then I wanted to. But don't you see?" Her gaze pierced him. "It was never my place. That's your job. You're her father." Tom's heart clenched, not with anger this time, but with something closer to grief. "And you do it beautifully," Elizabeth added, softer now. "You're a remarkable father. Emma is so lucky. But you can't do it all alone. And there's no shame in accepting help. There is." He shot back. "When that help comes wrapped in lies." She winced like he'd struck her. "You're right. I should have told you from the start. I should have trusted you to decide. But I was so afraid of losing what we'd built." From Emma's room came the faint sound of muffled sobs. The heartbreak in it hit them both like a blow to the chest. "She hates me," Elizabeth murmured, her voice breaking. Tom didn't immediately correct her. When he did, it came out hollow. "She's hurt and confused. We both are." She looked at him, pleading now. "Can you forgive me?" He studied the woman who had become part of his world in the quietest, gentlest ways. The woman who had shown up for birthday parties and bad days, who had wrapped herself around his daughters, fears and joy alike. The woman who had no blueprint for love, yet had learned to love them anyway. "I don't know," he said finally, with the honesty of a man who wanted to forgive but didn't know how. "This changes things. I don't know how to move forward." She nodded, a fresh tear trailing down her cheek. Then she stood, slow and aching, like the pain was in her bones. At the kitchen door, she hesitated. Without turning around, she said, barely above a whisper, "For what it's worth, loving you and Emma has been the best thing I've ever done, even if I ruined it." When the door clicked shut behind her, the silence was deafening. Tom sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by echoes of laughter, of stories, of the life they had begun to build. Her apron hung off the back of the chair like the ghost of a home that almost was. The meatloaf mix sat abandoned on the counter, growing cold like the ache in his chest. And from down the hall, Emma's quiet weeping felt like the sound of something breaking. The days that followed moved like ghosts through their lives. Emma went to school. Tom went to work. They didn't speak of Elizabeth, but she lingered in every silent breakfast, every missed laugh, every glance Emma threw at the front door as if half expecting her to walk through it, apology in hand and arms open. On Tuesday evening, Tom found Emma on her bed, surrounded by printed photos, moments frozen in time. Elizabeth and Emma at the science fair, their three-person adventures to the zoo, Elizabeth's pancake disasters, her triumphs, her tentative steps into their lives. "I miss her," Emma whispered, not looking up. Tom sat beside her, heart sinking. "I know, sweetheart, me too." Why'd she lie? He paused, choosing his words like stepping across broken glass. "I think she was scared. People do stupid things when they're afraid of losing something precious." Emma nodded slowly, her young face serious in a way that didn't belong to children. "Do you think she really loves us?" Tom didn't hesitate this time. "Yeah, I do. Then why aren't we talking to her? That question landed like a punch. Tom had no real answer, only pride and bruised trust, and the gnawing fear of how much her absence hurt. Maybe we should be, he admitted, voice rough. That Saturday, they stood together outside the gleaming tower of Harper Industries. Tom had called ahead. Elizabeth's assistant sounded surprised but hopeful. The elevator ride felt eternal, like rising toward a future none of them could quite picture. Elizabeth stood at the window. When they arrived, elegant, poised, but somehow smaller than he remembered. Fragile in her stillness. "Thank you for coming," she said stiffly, before softening. "I'm so glad you're here." Emma stepped forward before Tom could speak. "I'm sorry I ran away when you tried to explain." Elizabeth's armor cracked. She knelt down, her hands shaking. "Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for. I'm the one who made a mess of everything." "Dad told me you were scared," Emma said plainly. "I get scared too. Sometimes I think if I'm really good, Dad won't leave like Mom did." Elizabeth broke. Her tears came freely as she pulled Emma into her arms. "Your dad's not going anywhere. Not because you're good, but because he loves you exactly as you are. Like how we still love you," Emma said softly. "Even though you made a mistake, exactly like that." They held each other, fiercely, like they could anchor each other against the storms of life. Over Emma's head, Elizabeth looked at Tom. "Can you forgive me?" she asked, voice trembling. Tom looked at the woman cradling his daughter, the woman who had found them not with a plan, but with an open heart. He thought about the quiet in their apartment, the cold in the spaces she used to fill, the nights he reached for the phone only to remember she was gone. On one condition, he said. Stepping forward, Elizabeth tensed. "Anything. No. More secrets. No more trying to fix everything on your own. If we're doing this, if we're going to be a family," he didn't mean to say it, but the word felt right. "Solid. Then we make decisions together." Her lips trembled. "A family," she whispered. Tom brushed a hand along her cheek, amazed at the storm this woman had weathered and the softness she still had left. "Elizabeth Harper," he said, smiling. "You're the most stubborn, generous, impossible woman I've ever met. You thought you could buy your way into our lives, but instead you earned something far more valuable." "What's that?" she whispered. "A home." Emma piped up from Elizabeth's arms. "Right, Dad?" Tom grinned, something finally settling into place inside him. "Right, sweetheart. A home." 6 months later, Tom stood in the sunlit kitchen of Elizabeth's penthouse, their kitchen now watching his wife attempt to flip pancakes with Emma barking playful instructions from the counter. "You need more practice," Emma declared, as another pancake met the floor with a splat. "Hey," Elizabeth huffed, flour in her hair, batter on her shirt. "I'm improving." "The smoke alarm says otherwise," Tom teased, slipping behind her to turn down the heat. He kissed her cheek as he did, the warmth between them now second nature. Elizabeth leaned back against him, closing her eyes to soak it in the weight of love, the joy of being held, the miracle of belonging. "You know, what's funny?" she murmured. "I spent half my life trying to buy happiness. Turns out it was always free. I just had to be brave enough to let someone love me." Emma looked up from her juice. "And Dad had to be brave enough to love you back, even after you messed up, especially after I messed up," Elizabeth corrected with a smile. Tom turned her gently in his arms, eyes full of the home they'd built together. "You know what I learned?" he asked. "What?" "That's sometimes the best things in life aren't the ones you plan. Sometimes they're the ones that find you when you're just trying to do the right thing." Outside, the city buzzed with the lives of millions, but inside their kitchen, with burnt pancakes and unfiltered laughter, 3 souls who had chosen one another despite pain, despite fear, were crafting a life that no amount of money could buy. Not just a family, a home.